Good morning, gardening friends. Today is Sunday, April 14th, and we have a new stray kitty in the neighborhood, filling the void for baby. Cats just seem to appear from nowhere. In any event, I've decided to name her Liza. Good morning, Liza. It is a beautiful day today. Nice and sunny, and a lot has happened in the garden in a week. Of course, we had the solar eclipse last week. We had a pretty heavy storm that came through and dumped about 2.5 inches of rain later in the week. That wasn't too bad, but we did have some pretty strong winds that didn't really do any damage, but did tweak my yard a little bit. I'll show you as we go around. But I thought we'd start with my Sarracenias. They're still looking good. That Sarracenia, you can see the wind blew off the little lower petals, but they fall off anyway, so it was bound to happen. The dew is still out today. My strawberry pot with succulents is doing, I'd say, really well. And my sweet cordyline is coming back. I do like this sedum. And they really ought to call it the loaves and fishes plant. Because let's see, I had 3 bottom sedum in this pot last year. But the ones on the top, or the 2 on the top, are new. This one and this one I just planted this year. I decided last week to put in sedum in my urns, and I've got 8 sedum there, and I expanded the sedum around my little circular bed that contains the sundial. Put 4 plants there as well. I'll show you when we get there. And all of those came from this pot. And as you can see from this pot, you can hardly tell that anything was removed. So that stuff, if you get it at the right time of the year, it doesn't do that all year long, but in the spring, it really spreads quickly. I did get my first rose. The second one is looking kind of bad in the back right now. It should be picked. I grow mine for cutting inside, and when I cut them with about 1.5 foot long stem. But that first rose was beautiful. It was about 6 inches across. It was huge. Here you can see my potted aspidistra I brought out. I had that in my front porch, and I noticed that it got spider mites on me. The first time I've ever had spider mites on an aspidistra. So I will assume, and it was contained to the aspidistra. I don't see them anywhere else. It was probably just a little stressed being in the house. My experience with spider mites is they tend to affect, in fact, most diseases and or pests seem to prefer stressed plants over plants that are doing really well. I do like the look of this papyrus. I keep it in pots. You can't overwater it because it's always wet. I top it up every night. I can't plant it in the ground. In my backyard, I have tried to have ponds or little pools with stuff in them, and I have too much wildlife, raccoons and possums, and especially raccoons will love to rut around if you put a potted plant in a pond it'll be on its side and out of its pot, and the pond will be muddy the next day. So I've just learned through the years, I've been gardening here now for 30 years, actually 31. I don't even bother giving myself that headache. I have water around in pots, but there's nothing in it. So it stays a lot cleaner that way. I do see the Iachroma got a little leaf damage from the wind, but no big deal. I did have one of my bananas snap. It snapped midway up. I don't think, oh, there you can see. So I just cut it, and hopefully, if I get my phone just right, you can see the stem, and there it is. It's in the middle of the film right now. But it's coming back up again. It just snapped in half for some reason, too windy. And I got an order in from, I have to get the exact name, I wrote it down. Growers Exchange, the Growers Exchange. Got it off the internet. They do herbs. And I had been wanting to get these 4 herbs. First off, it's always cheaper if you can buy your herbs locally, because of course you save on the shipping. So after shipping, those 4 herbs wound up costing me about $50. However, I will have them hopefully for a good long time. What I bought were things that I have grown in the past and I can no longer get. This first one is the curry plant. It looks like rosemary, but I can smell it from here. It smells like curry. The second is a pelargonium. Most people call it a geranium, and it's a scented one, and it is called Rose of Attar, A-T-T-A-R. It is rose scented. That I will plant in a pot. The next one is marjoram, and the last one, which you can barely see, is going to be a test case. That is French tarragon. When I had my garden up in New York, I had a huge tarragon plant, and depending on where you read or what your source is, tarragon isn't really supposed to grow in a zone 9. I think a zone 7 or 8 is the highest that they recommend for it. So it can't take the heat of our summers. So I'm going to plant that in a pot. Most of those are going to go in a pot. I think the marjoram's going to go in the ground, because I've had luck with it in the ground before. But it's kind of odd because I'll be bringing the rose-scented geranium in from the cold of the winter, and I'll be attempting to bring in the tarragon from the heat of the summer. But certainly this time of the year it'll do well outside. Here you can see the amaryllis are still sending up their flowers. And there is activity on all 3 of these cycads. That one is a male cycad. This one is unsexed. It hasn't developed either way yet, so we shall see. The fountains are going. Most of the violets have disappeared, the flowers, that is. I do need to get some water. I noticed that the bird baths are low. You wouldn't think so since we just had a rain, but for some reason, well, animals like it. And like I said, I've got my own little ecosystem here. And you can see maybe in the sun, the mosquitoes are out. Yay! I have to be careful. Watch my hands, especially the one holding the camera. I did bring out my ground orchids that I had in my porch, and this is where they will spend the summer. They have done that for the last 5+ years. My loquat trees were one of the things that got hurt a little by the wind. Because they're heavy with fruit, You can see they're starting to turn orange. They're starting to ripen. The tops of them got splayed out and flattened a little. Nothing snapped, but it's because the winds came at the wrong time, right when the fruits are heavy. See, these are starting to turn orange, but they haven't yet. Maybe by next week I'll be eating some. Here you can see the yellow knockout roses are looking pretty good in the morning. And you can still see what's left of the inflorescence on the windmill palm. These other two are also windmill palms. The smaller one, they were planted at the same time. The smaller one I'm a little worried about, but it looks like it's coming back because the top of it seems to be getting smaller and smaller. Most palms do have a lifetime, and I've had those windmill palms for over 25 years, so they may be approaching the end of their life cycle. Blueberries haven't turned blue, but they're still there. They're starting to turn a little pinkish. I did notice that the winds kind of brought the fatsias closer to the blueberries. I may have to stake them back a little. Here you can see my pecan is sprouting. Someone had asked a question about the pecan, where did I get it? And I didn't. It just appeared. I imagine a squirrel buried one of the nuts there, and it came up. The only reason I'm pretty sure it's a pecan is I saw other pecan nuts around. There are no pecan nuts that I'm aware of in the neighborhood, so it was brought a long way. There's the pink angel's trumpet that I just planted. You can see the yellowed leaves on the top is where they got burned and starting to get eaten by slugs, but it'll grow faster than the slugs can eat eventually. You can see the bottle brush looks a little the worse for wear after the strong winds, but it didn't do any damage. And the flowers are probably just about done anyway. Have to be careful of the sun here. The white jasmine are almost in full bloom. They're still tolerable. Everyone likes the smell of jasmine, except when these topiary forms are in absolute full bloom, it will slap you in the face. I can't sit here for very long. It's just it's a cloying smell, let's just put it that way. I'm not allergic to it. There you can see my lavenders. Oops, just about fell over the table. Lavenders are doing well here. I keep them in pots. Back in here, it's just looking nice and green today. Nothing really new or exciting has happened. Oh, I see I need to cut this tip off. What I do with these agaves is they do have really nasty thorns. And I come out here with fingernail clippers every now and then and cut the thorns back to a stub, so that way at least if I accidentally nudge the plant, I'm not impaled. Of course, if you fall into it, it would not be pretty. And there you can see the Beaufort holly that I cut back earlier this spring, about a month ago, has come back. Sprouts all over the place on that. Did not have any blooms this year on my Ozark plum. My guess is, of course, it's only its second year. So my guess as to why there are no blooms, because it had blooms last year when it was in the pot, is it probably didn't get enough chill hours. Even though the Ozark plum is developed for the South, it does still require a minimum amount of chill hours in order to produce fruit. And I had to stake up my spiderwort because this tall plant was all flattened, but it's about bloomed out. So when it does bloom out, well, not really. It's got a whole bunch of buds to come yet. When it stops blooming, I will just snap the tops of that off, and then it'll be brought back to the level of the purple spiderwort. There you can see I have to bind that pencil holly. I think it's called sky pencil holly, because the wind has definitely twisted it apart. I can't remember if I told you last week, but I did get another one of these, which I can't quite think of the name fast enough. It's now called the tractor seat plant, Ligularia. I had this Ligularia for about 4 years, and it'll have stalks that get about 3 foot tall, about to there. Yellow daisy-like flowers. And this one I had a small Ligularia, which is still there, but I got tired of waiting for the small to get big, so I bought a bigger one. And we'll see if that one blooms. Interestingly enough, this Ligularia seems to be receding into the ferns as opposed to growing forward towards me. Don't know why, it's just doing that. Maybe it likes it better in the shade. Those will collapse in the heat. This is zone 9A, and in the heat of the summer, they do let you know when they need water, because the leaves basically fold upon themselves. I mean, it looks pitiful. It lets you know quickly that it needs a little water. And actually, even if you give it water, sometimes in really hot weather, it just droops like that in the heat of the day and then straightens right back up again in the cool of the evening. Here you can see a little bitty bougainvillea blossom on this one. This is the one that is on the wall that faces west. In other words, that's west. You can see the eastern exposure is in full bloom. This one takes a little bit longer, but it will be in full bloom as well. My Gara looks good at this point. I kind of like them when they're tight little plants like that. But it does look pretty too when they get really tall and leggy. Haven't showed you this plant yet. This, I noticed, has a bloom on it. One of my sedums. I believe that's a ghost sedum. And it did survive the 20-degree weather that we had last year. It doesn't survive, you'll see a little nip out of it over here, birds. They like to, and this was one of the sedum chunks that I put in as well. This pot had sedum here last year, and the birds developed a liking for the sedum, and they pretty much, by the end of the fall, there was nothing left. So I planted this, and in any event, it's looking good, and it has a nice little flower on it. This is my bay tree, and I hear Oscar meowing off in the background. Oh, here was some more amaryllis blooming. These are the only amaryllis that are not the red lion. I have 4 of these. I think they're called apple blossom. Very pretty. This is the time of year I have to look at the tips of all of the daylilies, because it's the time that the, what were they called? The big black grasshoppers, horse lubbers, Lubbers, hatch. And they're squishy at this point in the year. They're only about a size of a quarter. And so you can nip them in the bud really quickly before they become 4-inch monsters that will swallow up. They especially like the leaves of amaryllis. And they love the blossom stalks of spider lilies later in the year. and one can devastate a whole amaryllis when they get bigger. So when I see the little ones, I kill them. I don't spray them though, because there's not really a good spray to use. Here you can see one of my foxgloves. Hasn't opened yet, but will. It's the tail end of the Easter lilies that I purchased. The ones that were planted in the ground have not yet bloomed. I do like the look of the Lenten rose. It'll stay like that for a good long time. Let me go ahead and open the gate. I cleaned up a little over here. I did take out some more coleus. This was coleus that was, these were the two cuttings that I took that were in the kitchen over Christmas. This one was in a pot in my front porch, and this one's new. They seemed to do well over here last year, and when I removed the pot, it left such a nice opening that I thought that's where the toad lilies might try and grow, because it's the same exposure as in the backyard. This tree did pretty well. It fared well in the winds. The problem with putting a tree on this side of my house is when the winds come, they tend to splay it away from the house. They don't really break it, but they bend it in this direction. And so what I have to do from time to time is prune back some of these branches that are hanging way over so they don't get too heavy and encourage it to break. But it looks like, since I can still walk under it, that it wasn't that bad. The winds, that is. Here you can see lots of new nandinas. I will be cutting them back. This cordyline came back a lot sooner than the one in the backyard. And my lemongrass is being swallowed up by the nandina. I will have to trim the nandina back this week. Australian tree fern is still leafing out. This cycad lost a couple of branches because of the heavy winds, but I'm not going to cut it back yet because I don't see any signs of growth yet in the center. When I start to see a stalk come up, and maybe it's the beginnings of one now in here. Yes, it is. Okay. That's the beginning of a stalk. When it gets up a little bit taller than that, I will go ahead and cut all the leaves down off of it because they're kind of ugly looking, but they're better than just having a stub, in my opinion. Here you can see the red lion amaryllis. Some of them are past their prime. Some are just opening. And here's where I found the horse lubbers yesterday. They were climbing up to the tips of the amaryllis late in the night, or late in the evening. In fact, there's one. Let's see if you can see it right now. Not anymore. And there's another one down there. Oh, it got away. There's another one over there. Avert your eyes, if that offends you. But that's the only way you can find those little suckers at this point in time. They apparently are poisonous, so they don't really have any natural enemies. There is one bird that eats them in Alabama, but it is a winter bird, so it doesn't come around for the summer, so there's nothing to eat them at this point in the year. I did go ahead and plant my datura there. I don't know if that's a mistake or not, but it's going to stay. It looks like it'll grow there, but the problem is when you get a really, really bad rainstorm, it is right underneath where the two roofs meet, so it does have a gush of water that can come off of there. But it is what it is. It's planted now, and I'm going to leave it. Bananas are still doing well. Let's see if any of the new growth is coming up yet. I don't really see anything. I see little ones over there at the base of that one. This one I don't expect to see any because that one had the flower. And once when they have the flower, they'll die. Everything I transplanted last week in here is doing well. These were seeds, and they're 4 o'clocks. They may never bloom there. I didn't think about that until after I planted. Well, there wasn't really another spot to put them anyway. And of course, there are 2 purple coneflowers that I put here. All of those seeded, and they were in the potager. The 4 o'clocks do need some sun to bloom. So although they will have beautiful plants, they may not bloom. We'll see. Time will tell. I did want to mention, probably the plant of the week would be this Crinum Lily. It did blossom, or is in blossom, and it's got 1, 2, I guess 3 stalks altogether. That one I got free. We were driving in a part of town. Actually, it was near the edge of town, and no one lived nearby, so I didn't steal it out of someone's lawn, but it was in a ditch that was all overgrown, and it was a dry day, so the ditch wasn't full of water, and I went out and dug that up, and this is about 15 years later. That's one of the reasons they don't sell a lot of crinums anymore. This is probably only the 2nd year that it started blooming. They take forever to establish. Once when they establish, however, they'll bloom quite nicely, routinely. Let's see. My irises are doing really well. This is the Louisiana iris. And I did notice the flowers do tend to last more than 1 day, which is surprising for an iris. It's called, who is it? Audubon named it Iris hexagoni because it has 6 petals. He did that when he was out hunting for specimens in Louisiana. People don't remember that or think about that, but all of the birds that Audubon painted were ones he had shot, because back in those days they didn't have cameras. But be that as it may, Iris hexagoni. Apparently there are 4 types of Louisiana iris, 3 blue and 2 red, and these seem to really like this location. These iris have sent up a lot of leaves, but I don't see any bloom stalks yet. Sometimes they bloom in the fall. And this is the loquat that really got hit badly by the winds, but nothing's broken. It splayed out a lot at the top. It is a weakened tree. It has a bad gall right there right in the middle of the trunk. It's not going to live too much longer. However, it seems to be doing pretty well. There you can see, actually some of those look like they might be ripe. The good ones at the top definitely are. The good news is it bent the fruit down, and that's one of the things that's causing the tree to bend downward is the weight of the fruit. So I will probably be trying some of those loquats this week. Ferns are still doing well. This is where the ferns appeared one year. I had some of these in the backyard, and these appeared by themselves. I guess birds must have brought them somehow. And then I went ahead and decided to multiply them, so I put them in the four corners. That one didn't grow, it's too sunny or dry. And this one has some way in the back corner. It likes deep, deep shade. And then there's some Japanese painted fern. Doesn't like it there because of the dryness of the situation. The Loquat sucks all the water out of the ground, so I have to, if you want to keep it and fight Mother Nature, you've got to put a lot of water into it. These painted ferns do better over here. I guess right now there's less competition. But once when the fig gets a little bigger, we'll see. This is a black fig, Italian black. And the cutting that I took died. I never tried doing a cutting of fig. Normally when I do cuttings, I take fresh wood and stick it in water, and it did not like that treatment. And since I didn't really need another fig, I aborted that experiment. But the fig is looking really good, considering this is only its second year in this spot. And let's take a look at the potager. I did weed this parking spot. It always looks good with a crisp edge. This is one of the fallacies of landscape fabric. There is landscape fabric underneath this parking pad, and it is good for suppressing weeds. However, I put it in over 20 years ago, and since then, lots of dirt has just blown in on the top, and so things grow on top of the landscape fabric. This is the spot where I'm going to plant the marjoram. There's an open spot, though I say I still have flowers on my blackberries. It looks like some of the little Swiss chard has caught. Still got flowers on my strawberries. Dill is doing really well. And my cucumbers are still growing. I did see a video on bunching onions, which I had never grown before. And I'll have to follow their advice. They said to cut them back when you see the seed heads. You don't want to let them go to seed. Cut them back to the ground, divide them, and then replant them. And that's what I intend to do. Ooh, there it is. The experiment from this year. I dug these out of the lawn, 1, 2, 3, and they wilted to nothing, and now they're coming back. And that is Taraxacum officinalis, otherwise known as dandelion. I'm growing it for the greens, and growing it there, at least it won't get cut up by the lawnmower. This, by the way, is bee balm. I don't think I mentioned that in the last few times we've been showing the potager. Borage is doing well over here. This side of the potager is a little bit shadier, and borage is one of the few herbs that will grow in the shade. That's the reason I put the mint here. It's also in the shade, so I thought it would keep the growth of the mint a little suppressed, but we shall see. A bed of mint is not bad. The antirrhinums are starting to bloom. They do have a wonderful fragrance. I may cut some of the taller ones and bring them in the house. And there you have it for today. A lot of change has occurred in this last week. Fruits are ripening. And I hope you all get a chance to get outside and enjoy the beautiful sunny weather, if it's sunny where you are. So until next week, take care.